Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's episode. Tonight's episode, I thought of doing something interesting. Something which I feel I inevitably had to do in this life. It is something that is worth sharing. How the universal sector can speak through the individual. I feel I have a certain experience about this which I can share, and in this talk I'm going to attempt to. There is a quote by a man named Jalaluddin Maulana Rumi. Excuse me. And Rumi says, excuse me, no. This Sufi mystic poet Rumi, he says, he was alive 800 years ago. He says, before death takes away all that you're given, give away all that there is to give. And what that means is in a world where there are 8 billion creatures on a rock in the middle of nowhere, everything is required. Every tiny little bit of effort is required. You know, it's reaching a situation where imagine like the world was divided. Imagine the world was divided in a way where between good and evil. And so while the good was fighting the evil and the evil was fighting the good, suddenly there was an alien invasion, imagine. And for the first time, the good and evil had to make a choice. You see it in a series that develop where the two main characters who are opposing one another, they suddenly unite and all the audience is like, no way, the bad guy and the good guy are on the same team. Anyways, an observance of life and sharing while you can. Now to onwards towards the talk. There's a phenomena I'm going to share with you my own experiences in this life. The way I opened up to my inner realms, there was an incident in 2011 that happened that made me notice the inner realms. But how I began working with them was a totally different incident. And I'll tell you the story. I was at this, long story short, I was visiting York University in Toronto, and there's a fountain. There's a fountain there. And it was a point in my life where there was a lot of things it wasn't confusing, it was like my life was missing. It was as if I had missed the train of my own life. It was a feeling like that. I remember for the first time, guys, it's so vivid. I was sitting by that fountain and my fingertips were connected. I just kept my fingertips. You know how some people do biceps seated? It was like I was seated like that, but my fingertips were touching and I was just looking at the water of the fountain. And that was the first time in my life I noticed another thought stream. Now I'm going to explain to you what I mean by this. I was sitting in front of this fountain and I have a certain pace, I think. I mean, I don't call it thinking, but my inner realms. Now, at the time, what's funny is at the time I didn't have the word inner realm. I hadn't established that in my psyche yet. So at the time, I remember I would call it consciousness streams. Anyways, so what happened is this was the first incident before the person you see is speaking to you right now. This is a while back. So what happens? I'm sitting there, and for the first time, I notice a way of thinking that is faster than I normally think. That means imagine you're sitting somewhere, you're zooming in on the water of a fountain in front of you. You're contemplating your whole life and like narrative, and the inner realm was going at a certain speed. That was the first time where I noticed a different speed of my own inner realms moving. And it was two speeds, like seeing two cars moving at different speeds on the highway. It was as vivid as that. And I remember I was inhaling and exhaling, and every time I would inhale, there was no voice, but in my exhale, I would hear. It would, as if suddenly you know what it was? It was like, you know how we have this thing where the water of the ocean goes and hits the beach, and whatever you wrote on the sands gets wiped. This was another way. This was as if like when the water, when I would exhale, when the water would go over the sand, when it would come down, there would be writings left. It would be like the opposite way of how the ocean and the sand work. So I remember it was an experience that it felt to me like I don't remember which way it was. I think it was, I experienced what felt to me was a very, very short conversation in a very, no, it was the other way. Was it a long? Whatever happened was I pretty much sat there in front of the fountain, and every time I would exhale, there would be a sort of dialogue. So it was the first time I was actually noticing my inner, not noticing, listening to my inner realms. Not just noticing that there's something else other than the physical faculty, but that there was another rhythm. It was, you know what it was? It was like you're sitting in a room. Imagine you're in a room and there's a violinist, and that violin sound is like the sound of your thinking. Imagine suddenly I heard a guitar. Imagine I'm just these are metaphors. There was no instruments, but I'm just saying in the experience, it was like I suddenly noticed a different tune of my own attention, a different way my inner realms were animated. Because a friend asked about the language of nature, the raw experience of it is the only thing one can say about it. So, anyways, what happened was I remember I sat down in my inner realms. There was a dialogue, information, words, sentence structure I had not known. Like if it was a subconscious part of my autonomous, I could, if it was my unconscious, it was very unfamiliar to me. It was a dialogue about channeling spaces. First time. Now, what happened was there was a book on the place where I was, where there was a on my bookshelf, let's say. On my bookshelf, there was a book I had never opened. At the end of that dialogue, sitting in front of that fountain, there was something where it said page 85. Exactly that book. Exactly. It was strange. It wasn't more like a communication. It was more like it was like memories, instant memories being generated or being noticed. Anyways, I go home and I open this book and I get shocked that everything I had heard in my inner realms in that, I don't know what the time was like, in that time I was in front of the water fountain. I go home, I open the book, exact same concepts. Exact this book I had never opened. And of course this is something of a personal thing. I don't usually share incidents of this nature, but due to the nature of this talk being when the universal sector speaks to you through you, I'm sharing my evolution of how I've been acquainted to the communication of my inner realms with the audience. So I remember it began, that was in one moment where it was an event that kind of catalyzed, made me notice that there's something else going on. After that point, it was as if my whole life, if I had felt shunned by silence, for the first time, silence became actually a source of information, a new angle of information. You see, some people, they're not comfortable with silence. You could see this especially in youth. When they're suddenly silenced, their anger rages as if they didn't get to finish the artwork they wanted in the moment. And so the person goes into that sort of, childlike crying mentality. These are subconscious, but I mean it in the sense of, like, you see a child, you give it a toy, it's laughing, smiling, you take the toy away, it cries. You give the toy back, it suddenly smiles, right? So in human psychology, we're like poetically, not poetic, I mean in reality, we're all like grown children. We have memories of our childhood still accessible, so we have a component to our childhood engaged. So this no what I'm trying to say is that it's similar, but now the toys and the phenomena has changed. Do you see what I mean? Do you see that this earth has never been the earth we have been heard, but it is the earth that we open, the earth we activate? you know there has been moments in my life where I will tell you the truth, I have been silenced by my inner realms. I have been pushed from rhythms that I trusted. That means if I could tell you my experiences really so far, I would tell you that I have been a fool in front of my eyes and behind my eyes. But there was the blessing of nature's intention above man. And that's what I'm saying, dear listeners, that we are antennas. And for the first time, we're becoming acquainted with it, and it's hilarious. People are going to freak out because we feel it is so fixed. We feel that reality has to be a picture on the wall, or what do we do with it? We think that every moment of this life has to be a comprehension and an analysis, but there are some people in this world where the silence for them is the epitome and the evolution of all sounds that have had meaning in man's mind. How you get acquainted with how you get acquainted, there we go. Guys, give me a second so I can get acquainted with the word acquainted. Oh man, that was one of the silliest sentences I've said in my life. Let me get acquainted with the word acquainted. Oh man, if there's beings in other dimensions, they'll be like, what is this comedy show? Anyways, guys, sorry, let me bring my attention back in the room. There is a sort of progression of events. Think of it this way. A child has to use different words to get comfortable saying those words, and the child has to also hear those words. So there is a component to ability where you got to receive it and express it, then it becomes complete ability, you know? For me, there was a subconscious noticing of life having its own intelligence and me being just a little part of it. There is always that. There is a humble angle where man can fall from the clouds. Only to realize that a sphere in emptiness has no direction. So guys, this is what happened. This was the sequence. When my inner realms began activated, it was as if noticing there is more to the picture. That more to the picture makes you humble, and it's really the only thing that makes you trust the unknown. When you trust the unknown, it's this strange moment where the observer is watching itself It's a mirror of life moment. I've called it in other talks. The mirror of existence, finding the mirror of existence. Some people, they're blessed. You can see that their eyes have already looked at in that mirror of existence. Children, they're functioning in a different field of knowing. You see, doubt sends echoes, sends shock waves in the subconscious. That means if you see someone and you doubt them, the mind has already started writing a story about them, but the story is not conscious. And so what's going on really when it comes to the mind is that man has to be still. There is two ways of achieving something. Either you had achieved it from the beginning and you didn't realize, or you achieve it anew. The mystical angle is you remember that you're in greatness. The advanced communicator angle, which I'm more inclined, it's not just about remembering your greatness, it's about playing your part. You see, it's as if wondering if human analysis is enough to just explain what's going on here. Just like the person needs freedom, needs space, their elbow needs to be in a proper place before they write. Similarly, the trust I'm speaking about of the unknown is like the same trust your elbow has when you're writing something, or your forearm has when you're writing something, you know. Then it's the writing part. So it's like life is kind of like knowing what you want to write, then writing it. The inner realms see the potential. The inner realms are here to work with the potential of the realm. The outer realms are here to be the expression of the realm. Right now, my body is waiting for the instructions of my brain as we see it in the mainstream. But then my brain is looking at its body and getting instructions. You know, it's like we are thinking that the world is kept by laws. I think the evolution of law will be comprehension of communication between dimensions. I feel what is the law? I mean, think about it. We have noticed that there is individual life forms. That's how we consider ourselves. We are life forms. Now, what if there is the life formless? What if there is a way we can comprehend life that it surpasses the way we relate to form? So that's the unknown. Just think of it this way. There are known languages and there are unknown languages. The alphabet for known languages is symbols. You can go check the dictionary. But the alphabet for the unknown language is events. It's as if the planet speaks through events to the human mind that can observe multiple events. So anyways, in my life there was two components. There was the very linear A to B to C to D kind of basic survival path of a life. There was you can say there was the Iron Man suit of life, and then there was the real me, which I say is the inner life, where in society, when people, for example, lie, that's what's going on. They're hiding their inner life, when you can never hide your inner life. I'm not joking. Literally, if a person knows how to read the language of eyes well, they can look at your eyes and they could know. They could instantly know. The reason why they say the eyes are the window to the soul, I laughed so hard when I realized this. Right? I mean, of course, yes, a mystical angle, where's the light going and whatnot. But from another angle, It's literally where you're looking at is like what you're trying to figure out. That means if someone is trying to solve a puzzle and there's a puzzle in their hand and their eyes are looking at it, you look at their eyes, yeah, window to their soul. They're trying to solve the puzzle. You can know if the person, their attention is on the outer realm or their attention is on the future of the outer realm, which is an inner event. Do you know how many people I've talked with enthusiasm just to know, oh, wait, I'm alone in this room. You know, I'm bilingual. I've never tried this, but I think I should try. Where when in the middle, when I'm saying something and someone's not listening, I switch languages, and I'm like, "Is this guy still listening?" If they have no, if the person has no opinion, you 100% know they're in their inner realms. Now, not to stall and get to the idea. Why is a person calling himself Mr.Within and talking about the advancement of communication in the universal sector? Why? Why is there a need? You know why? Because the world has an edge. The world has an edge. And once we reach that edge, the mind embraces the past, kisses it on the forehead, and says goodbye. And it comes to the present to attend its work, and then the future sees the sacrifice. And then the work begins. Your great work finds you. There was a sentence I wrote in this book which is very unedited. And I published it. Like, that requires a lot of faith, guys, to publish an unedited book, you know. But I was like, all right, let's keep it raw for the audience, you know. And in this book, there's a sentence that says, your work works with you. That whoever is listening, whatever individual consciousness is active, now it has come the time where human beings are realizing the giant and the shoulders we're standing on. It's responsibility, but responsibility simplified that it's just how are you responding. For me, that's my ability. That's all of shamanism. How tender your heart was before it stamped a meaning into the world. How much the person could become fascinated not just by their life. Honestly, I feel I'm like, what is this? Is everybody entering this world and being self-obsessed? For a second, I thought, what if we didn't have to take care of our bodies? What if everybody was like immortally healthy? Just we never died and immortally healthy. I actually sat down, guys, and I thought about what would an immortal civilization do? Because technically, that's the hope of our history. Think of it this way. Rather than you thinking that known is an illusion, distrusting it, seeking a metaphysics, cool, like juicy metaphysics in the unknown, we are in some sense saying, all right, let's just first see what do we know, and then you'll notice the edges. So if you don't fear your own stupidity, listen to me what I'm saying here, anybody who's listening here. If you don't fear your own stupidity, you unlock the ultimate tester in your psychology. If you don't fear being a fool, you know what that means? That means the fool loses many battles. Many battles. Why? Because he is not fighting them. To the fool, he is not in the war. He's not in the battlefield. He's in the playground. You know? That means imagine a soldier on a battlefield suddenly thinking they're in a playground, and you're looking at them, and the person's smiling and happy, and they're going about, but bullets are being shot. Imagine. Imagine World War II scenario or something. It would be a situation where you would see as if on some level there is an ignorance that we are in a dualistic dimension that requires immediate attendance. And then it's also from another angle where you got to be gentle with life and let it do its thing. That is the biggest thing in life, that you let it continue. That means if you honor the spirit of continuity, it echoes. If you dishonor the spirit of continuity, I am telling you, it's like your subconscious is going to be like, all right, man, we burning the whole place. Like that means the archetype becomes savage to the realm. You got to see as if like some part of our psyche is like our child self reacting to every situation because we have a memory of that self, and some part of it is even our abstract potential of a self. So that moment when you see there's some people in like the Olympics where they're trying harder than the rest, that's because it's as if like this the possibility there are the future self, it has become more real than their past self, and they're almost there and they can almost touch that moment and they march, you know, like it's that intensity. There was something I remember I saw from Game of Thrones that made me laugh, you know, where usually you see kings give like great speeches. I think it was Stannis or something in Game of Thrones. Was it Stannis? No, no, no. There was, sorry, it wasn't Stannis. There was this character in Game of Thrones where their kingdom or something was being sieged, and the person's like, "There's people at our door. Let's go kill them." Like that was the king's speech. There was no fight for honor for your families. You know, it was just like, "There's people at the door. Let's go take care of." It was like so. There's so many ways to walk in this world. Now think of how many ways there are to communicate. Now think of how many ways there are to receive communication. During those times where I had that, I kind of noticed different consciousness streams, different speeds of thought. That was when the speed of thought became very fascinating for me. I had a friend that came to me, and this was a point where I hadn't become very acquainted with my inner realm, so that I had doubt. You know, don't think I was just a person who was like, yay, yeah, I know everything. It's never like that. It's always you pilot through the storm, you get through it, then you have stability for some time. Then there's other storms and you just prepare meanwhile. If you don't fear the fall, you will master flying very quickly. If you fear the fall, you fear your future. So guys, Daniel in the chat section says, artists are the vanguard of the species. Cornell West says this. Cornell West. So this quote's from Cornell West. Artists are the vanguard of the species. You know what artists are? Artists are like they are cavalry. And philosophers are like, I would say philosophers are like soldiers. You know, because really what's happening with ideology is that it's either imagine language as a finger, and it's either pointing to a material conclusion or an immaterial conclusion. And what do we do with both matter and the immaterial? What have we done with space and matter? We have injected stories in it. We have injected stories in what's physically here. We call it even the here and now. And then we've also injected stories into the void, the afterlife, the gods, the beyond, the other dimensions, da, da, da. So it's like we're doing the same thing to two different dimensions. Anyways, here's the thing. As I began trusting my own mind, I began listening to it. So usually we think our minds are here for expression only. But if you realize your mind is here also to receive expression, like here's the thing. First, the student learns from an outside teacher, okay? But then the student wonders who's the teacher of the outside teacher. And then suddenly the student realizes the greater teacher, the world. That means the outside teacher is learning directly from the world. The student is learning from the teacher. Now check this out. What happens when you learn directly from the world? What's the next phase? You then learn from your eyes. When you learn from your eyes, that's when what happens to you in the moment is more fascinating than what anybody else's opinion has been on any moment. That's when you begin noticing the space of your intelligence, and then you become also attentive to the phenomena in it. Charles says, receiving to bestow. Yeah, it's one of those things. You gotta, in this life, two skills are important. There's moments where the person has to learn to take things. That means when you're given a gift, you gotta learn to receive. And when there's times also when you are taken things and you gotta learn to let go. These are the most basic things. Any person fixes this, they will live a karmic, they can pilot very peacefully and efficiently. Not just even peacefully, I would say. You would pilot like an advanced human being. Why? Because you have realized it is your birthright. It is the birthright of consciousness to go to its event horizon. So anyways, various events happened, and I received, it was a point where I could tell you, I'm being very personal in this talk. But I remember even I reached a point where I was becoming curious about reality and its other dimensions, and my mind, I could say the unknownness. This was how I was perceiving it, the unknown communication of my mind. So I remember I have written many essays where in those essays it's been like my mind showing me what it's doing before I do anything. There's been many moments where I have been like, all right, I got a mind. What is this? You know? Like, what is this? Seriously? And then when I started writing, that's when I noticed we are not in one room. That imagination is a gift from the gods. For me, wonder is divine. For me, anything that is new has a value. You know what it is? It's like really ideas have life cycles. So guys, I started giving these talks in 2014. So the build up, let me see how much of the gaps I could fill in properly of what happened from that moment where I was by the fountain. What ended up happening was first, there wasn't like something about me. I've been a very quiet and silent person my whole life, most of my life and my youth. Why? Because I don't know. I think somebody scared me when I was like, I weren't even conscious as a kid or something. There was something, I had a huge distrust of the world and the distrust of my own expression in the world. And even worse than that, worse than doing something wrong, is doing something wrong and everybody telling you, good job, keep going. Like that's even the worst, you know? So what happened, guys? From that time, I started writing, and I wrote to a point where, have you ever done something and you fascinated yourself, or it's like the first time you get that adrenaline rush when you solve the Rubik's Cube? You get that adrenaline rush, like, holy shit, did it happen? Pretty much you reach a point where you hug your inner child goodbye and you walk in the world with a knowing that the future knows itself. And this will echo on. The way you walk, the trust you have in human intelligence's steps, that is it. That means even if you're a person who you may not even like the human species, but at least trust how you live. There's no greater prayer to the cosmos. There's no greater response. That means that the cosmos, nature, it doesn't speak a language, but love is that thing where you're like, wow, you know, it's like, I love the world, and they're like, why? Because it was here and now I can be here. So what ended up happening, I started writing personal essays, and then a poetic dimension opened up. I started writing lots of poetry. I would just grab the pen whenever I would feel the emotion. I would just go get a notebook and sit down and just write whatever. I trusted the expression, I would write. And it reached a point where I remember it was an incredible year. It was the year 2013, 12 to 13, where I wrote a series of books called the Divine Notes series. And two of the books are out there, but a lot of the books I haven't published. And the way I would write these books is I would wake up with my pajamas, like, you know, just with my like sleepwear, you know. You know, and this is a while back. And what happened is I would wake up early in the morning, just super, like, just in that early morning vibe where you haven't even washed your face in the morning. Like in that early, I would wake up, I had this laptop, I would press record, and I would just talk to the computer. And I would not have any expectation. It was a way of me just seeing how the inner realms would happen, you know? And so I noticed that there were many storylines. So if I take the Jungian angle, Carl Jung's approach, there's a lot of mysteries in the unconscious. There's a lot of storylines. I wouldn't be surprised if in front of our eyes we feel we're one kind of creature, but behind our eyes, I think the mind is living multi-dimensional positions. That means to the mind on that subtler, in your subtler planes, in your inner realms, there is a subtlety there. So the thing about imagination is, anybody right now imagine, what's something easy to imagine? Okay, imagine a purple glowing apple in the air in front of you right now. Imagine a purple glowing apple. Light purple, not dark purple. You know? Imagine that. So right now, whoever's listening, Mr. Within's asking you, just imagine, visualize. Visualize right now in the air, there's a small and very slowly orbiting, glowing purple apple. Just visualize that. Okay? Now, look, here's the cool thing. You can visualize it, but you can't pick up that apple and take a bite out of it. That means you can access the design of visualization consciously, but you cannot touch the visualization like it's a real thing. So the thing is, imagination is real to the mind, but inaccessible to the body. That means my body can't touch the thought of me right now. You know? There is something about life when you realize, the midnight oil burn, you realize the legacy of the human species was to roar every day before you go back to sleep. Roar once at least. So I wrote a series of books. I'm just going to say the names, guys, because who knows how long the breath is in this sector. I'll say this. These were the titles of the book. So The Great Work was the first one. The second one was Highway to the Stars. The third one was Contortions to Affordable Grace, Cationic Imprints, The Inventor's Sphere, The Ancient Listeners, Vision Extraction, Hidden Engineer. These are titles of books. Gift of Fibonacci, Heavena Principia, I think there was one more, but Rage of Madness, something like that. Rage of Madness, some book like that. But it was a very small one, that one. So I wrote these in a year, and the way was I just wanted to see what's going on with intelligence at the moment. Like, that's, every human being has a right to study, like, themselves at least. You can study what you are as a creature. Like, think of it this way: just like the scientist would study like the organism under a microscope, the mystic would go in a cave and be like, all right, I'm an organism, let me see if I can study myself. The mystic would close its eyes, and the inner realms would suddenly, like a pond, their ripples would settle. And that moment, when the last ripple has entered the silence, when there is no God and man, there is just moment being moment. It is from space that freedom to move arises. Space is the divinity that allows movement. So it's as if when you as a human being realize there's two sides to the coin, that there is a part of your life you could always see, and there was a part to your life you could never. That we spark our truths and our meaning in a system that surpasses any word we can give it. That means, look at the word universe, one verse, as if our universe is a sentence in the void. So after I wrote those books, every trusting moment of my own intelligence's expression, it was like a mini battle. Some battles there would be no trust. The whole thing is, when you're alone and no one can see you, that's where the true training starts. That means you can see there's the martial artists that they practice in the dojo with everyone. Then there's those students who all the students are like, how are these students updating? Because these students go outside and just in alone in the silence of nature, the person practices the martial art or just sees, all right, I'm a human, I'm a creature. How does this intelligence move? You see, because I give myself a lot of permission, and some people translate it as boldness, but that boldness is me like, all right, I'm just exploring. That means it's like put your hand in the cookie jar, and when asked why is your hand in the cookie, what I mean by that is like not like I'm not talking about it in a social level. I'm saying like it's just you realizing there is no greater teacher and no greater student than this moment. When you realize this, what can I say? The universe has always spoken. So trust is hearing the voice of the world that was here before your voice was. So after the books, then it became 2014. And it was such a strange phase of my life when I gave these talks. Because I was in such a social, I was in like a really, like in regards to my environment, and I could say there was a point where I renounced the type of life just to see the next phase of my own eyes. It felt like that. And I'll tell you, it was strange. I was a very open person. Then it was as if something had happened where there was a work. It was as if it felt like this long-term project. That it was so long-term, it didn't matter. It didn't matter how it happened anymore. You know? There is a quote by Rumi. He says, when I was younger, I wanted to change the world. Now that I'm older, I'm changing myself. That means that all those people trying to save the world, they'll eventually realize, all right, your free will has a little bit of control, like not that much control. So here's the thing, guys. By increasing the ability and the communication of the human being, we require to evolve language. We either update the old or build the new. We either create new letters or change the rules of the past lettering system. Life is ultimately interpretation of endless moments. I'll tell you, it'll appear like that. You can judge yourself based on one moment, and a week later you'll be like, yeah, I was definitely freaking out last week. You know, like you'll see, you can observe yourself from multiple angles. Now, the whole point of me saying this is that my evolution towards these talks began with a sort of trust of my own intuition, not because it was a promise of something in the unknown, simply because I had noticed the known. I knew what I knew, and I knew what I didn't, and I was just watching. It was before even the archetype of the fool. It was the archetype of empty seeing. Like emptiness is watching emptiness. And then emptiness is watching something. And then something thinks it's watching emptiness. Then that something realizes sight doesn't belong to anything. Sight is the higher dimension. Consciousness is the higher dimension. So when you trust life, it makes you realize that this giant turtle that civilization is built on its back, you touch the neck of the turtle and you feel its heartbeat. Then you become a human being. So I would say it's like not every human being on this planet is being a human being. So many people, they're locked in their inner realms. Because let me tell you why. Because people care about their families, but when it comes to their species, they don't care. I was like that too. That's why I'm saying it so openly. There was a phase in my life where I was like, okay, I'm here for a little while. The Earth's been here for a long time. Why should I care? Why should I care for the outer event? It was only when I realized that the outer event was why we are here. And not because of some galactic narrative, even though there will come a time where we will open up to galactic archetypes. Right now, we're defining ourselves based on the colors painted on the face of this rock, this earth, and we can instantly identify, or even in the future identify, with constellations. Instead of nations, every nation is a constellation. That's the thing. There is no instruction book for it. There is no teaching for it. It's just that you're existing and you have a conscious capacity. And when you notice you're existing, you come to the author's table, you come to the blank page. When you come to the blank page, either you do nothing, hover in non-duality, and the world gives you your duality, just like Oliver Twist style. Sir, can I have more duality? You know? That's really going with the flow mindset, you know? And then there's the point where the person has found contentment. That means if the person truly understood oneness, they wouldn't need the idea of oneness. Duality would not be a problem for them. You see, there's a strategy, it's the whole fight or flight thing, but it's echoing through very complex lenses, filters. So I'm saying that in front of our eyes, yeah, one event, one physical body, yeah, biological body jumping up and down in there. But behind our eyes, the person, while jumping up and down in the air, can remember their past, visualize the future. Someone can call it. That image can evoke something. It could be, I have headphones on. The music is evoking images. And the inner realms it's like every person's inner realms. If from a subtler dimension, we could see it. It's geometrical sculptures. Everyone, the way they speak, it would appear as a sort of geometrical sculpture poetically. You know? So, yeah, guys, I mean, there's a lot of details I've missed. These are years of my life. I'm just trying to give certain snapshot photo album kind of ideas to you. But really, what it was one thing that came in my writings that I would write for myself was that I honestly felt it was from the logos. And what it was don't look for a face in the unknown. Don't fall in love with the unknown in the sense of, in a certain sense of, don't romanticize the unknown. That is the same, that's the same as somebody wanting treasure. You know, there is no treasure. We're just an event. We're just an event, just chilling. And the whole universe, it's going to blow people's mind, but this is really the story we say if we choose to be materialists, that we are temperature. We are temperature. Temperature is the king of history. Temperature is the hands of the sculptor. And so it's not to say human beings, known society is an illusion, run towards the truth of the unknown. It's not something like that I'm saying. I'm just saying before we have a story for the world, it's happening. And that's the true teacher. How your eyes know the unknown. That's the end of suffering. That's the true end of suffering. You're like, oh, it's unknown. I don't even know how I'm suffering after that point. It's like Terence McKenna says, nobody knows enough to worry, you know? That means, to be honest, guys, I am communicating it through language, maybe in a certain context or in a certain way, but at the time, that's the beautiful thing about your mind. It has a preparatory dimension to itself. It's also taking care of itself if you don't, but you got to be mindful. That means just like how the body, there's a sort of scratch, and like the person, there's the body heals itself. Similarly, the psyche heals itself, but the person has to be mindful, you know? The inseparability of the individual and the cosmos. And that's the beautiful thing, that we are our own dance, the once in a lifetime expression of the human being. You know, that means it could be, we could go extinct and billions of years could pass, but it's as if while we're alive right now, we know we were here. So I found myself, I'm just constantly trying to relate this to my personal experience, and really that was it. I would get the phone, get a cup of tea, sit down, press the record button on the iPhone app. You don't know how many times I've pressed that red button on the iPhone memo app, the voice memo app. And that was the thing. It was as if first it was a process to be, let's say, analyzed, articulated. Then it became something I was looking at. It was like watching a movie. I could tell you that's the fascination I found with the inner realms. That was when I felt there's more going on to the world because we're processing the world in one way. That means in a certain way. There's a quote from Heraclitus. He says, no man steps in the same river twice, and it is not the same man, and it is not the same river. And by the way, Heraclitus, I believe he's the founder of the word logos that comes to us from ancient Greece. The ancient Greek philosophers were mighty. They were very incredible beings. There have been philosophers everywhere. The philosopher was just the creature that was more curious. That means you can say there was an inner strength and an outer strength. The outer strength, the creature that had more physical power. But you can say the inner strength was the creature that was more curious. But you could put an alpha of one species with a beta of that species. Now it is true, if there's a limited resource, the alpha wins. But if one of them has more curiosity, if the alpha just is, let's say they find food, the alpha and beta, they find food, the alpha's like, no, it's mine, you know? So the alpha gets the food. Now, instead of fighting the alpha, the beta has curiosity, a dimension of curiosity. It wanders a bit forward and finds even a bigger bush, finds even a higher quality food. So I'm telling you, there is this thing that it's not all about power games in this life. It's not all about strength and display. Or another way of saying that is command and conquer. Because the heart has its own language too. It's just not in words. It's in noticing life in the moment. Because imagine the notion of panpsychism. Panpsychism is the idea there's a mind behind everything. That means those people who became vegetarians, suddenly they realized no way even vegetables had minds. We were killing vegetables too. There was no way we could solve the solution of our food without, because everything could have a mind. Even this cup of coffee in a panpsychist view has a mind. In Shintoism, which is similar, has certain similarities to that. In Shintoism, all matter is a vessel for a highway of souls. I could say poetically. That was my interpretation of it, from at least. So what does that mean? That means mind is everywhere. If like an onion, it's the outer layer and we're inside. And that's it. Really, it's nothing, not something that you can find. It's something you notice about how your own eyes have awakened to the world. It's like forgetting the idea of knowledge. Whoever made the IQ test had a very low IQ. There's so many ways intelligence moves. That's not just even in language. You know? I think the guy got, like, maybe he was forced to. I think the guy who made the IQ test, somebody was like, go make a test about intelligence. And the guy's like, what? What, me? And he's like, yeah, intelligence quotient. But I'm telling you, it's ridiculous. Intelligence is about awareness. That's it. That means if you're beside a volcano and there's lava coming down from the volcano, it doesn't matter how much you have knowledge or a specific ability. If you don't see the lava, you're a fool. The lava, you're a fool. You know what I mean? So that's intelligence. It's an awareness thing. So guys, Dan has shared something which he says Terence McKenna took Heraclitus' statement one step further. If you don't step in the same river twice, then you don't step in the same river once. If you don't step in the same river twice, then you don't step in the same river once. If you don't step in the same river twice, that means if you don't move, then you don't step in the same river once. Yeah. Oh, so he's saying it's void. Yeah. So Terence McKenna is saying it's all a simulation. So he's connecting Heraclitus's kind of infinite parallel realm theory to a sort of infinite parallel moment, new self, new self, new self theory to, in some sense, the whole thing being a simulation, that if you don't move, there's no person to even be in the river. There's no river and no person if there's no movement. So Dan, thanks for sharing that. That's as far as I could see into that quote, at least. Anyways, guys, the whole thing of it was that you notice you have a unique DNA, that you in your whole life have gone towards probably many books, read many books, you've sought knowledge outside of yourself, but there's one book which the only way you can read is by studying yourself, and that is the book of your DNA. Okay? Everybody is like a rare instrument. Your DNA is a rare instrument, and as a field of its governing intelligence, you have the command. And that is when the mind will honor you. You see, there's a way where there was a sort of forced organization, and there was natural organization. Do you know that we have had in this world honest leaders and dishonest leaders? And what have the honest done? They have stood their ground. That's it. What else can you do? What else can you do in a world where nature is not being treated by nature, even though everything is nature? when you stop being a person, your presence is in the driver's seat, your personality is in the passenger seat, your true intelligence activates. So that means, here's the thing, we have this notion we have to do more to get somewhere better. That is true in certain levels, certain dimensions, but in certain dimensions, especially from the Taoistic view, the less you do, the more you have an awareness of even where you want to go. So it's a sense of, it's a notion of watching life, then riding the waves. Watching life, then riding the waves, and at the end, you take one glance at your masterpiece, and the master dissolves in pieces. Your masterpiece becomes how elegantly and how honorably your breath went beyond its limits. The great samadhi. And as Mahatma Vijayanand, a person who I met in India, told me to say, Jai Satchidananda, that, oh dear dweller in the realm of form, being conscious of this existence is the bliss beyond worlds, the bliss beyond words, the silence that knew it all before the voice could doubt, And that was the thing. So for me, it was upon noticing the inner realms, of course, there came a phase afterwards. And the phases that came afterwards were more like a sense of listening to the inner realms, but then the inner realms doesn't want you to listen to it, wants you to just learn from it. As if your mind, as if everything doesn't want you to be that, but it's like part of the angle of the sculptor's hand in the world. Any system of thought that denies the free will its own questioning is a broken system. There's an issue I saw between both the materialistic perspective and the immaterial. Do you know what the issue is? That in some sense they are both extremes. They are both exiling a certain perception. From the evolutionary perspective, it's as if language is a hallucination. From the religious perspective, it's as if there is no language, there's just the soul, and the soul returns to the home, or wherever. It's a sort of one mind movement. The hive's mind is the mover of the realm in that sense. So it depends, There was times in my life where I was tired of the world, and there was times where I couldn't be tired. There was so much to do that it's as if like everything has as much dimensions as man's effort can lead. You know what that means? That means you can endlessly write a book, but you got to choose at some point where the edge of the end of the meaning is. You got to choose when you stop the sentence or all that. So that's the thing, it's a very strange, preferenceless, selfless sort of moment where you're saying, all right, let us see how the world is moving. In 2015, while giving these talks, in one of the talks, I had an experience where I noticed my moment as the whole moment. What I mean by that is there was a point where I was identifying with just the content in my moment. Then there came a moment where I wasn't just identifying with the content of my moment. I could notice my intuition. Then there came a moment where I noticed my intuition and conscience, everything was in the beam of my attention, which was moving as the whole moment, regardless of the content inside it. So, in a strange way, I feel that life is a spherical TV screen which we are seeing from the inside of the sphere. There's a story I want to share, guys, before I end off. This story is the essence of this talk, I would say. By the way, uh, I've shared a Discord link. There's going to be philosophical discussions in the School of Athens 2.0, which is the Discord group. People can feel free to click on the link, but when the talk ends, the link's going to become, it's like, I don't know how people are going to access it. Anyways, this is the story. It's a Vedic story. This guy, he wants to get enlightened. One day he looks in the mirror and he's like, yeah, I want to know who this guy is, you know? And so he goes to this man where there's this man meditating beside this sort of huge stable where a lot of cows are. And this man sees that there's in the early mornings this enlightened yogi or guru. He would go and meditate beside the barn where the cows were, and nobody would disturb him. But this guy would pass to work or something, and he would see this. So he just comes to this man and says, not even work. Let's say back in the day there was no work. Back in the day, everybody was an entrepreneur. You know. And what happened was, he goes to the guru, pretty much. This guy, he wants to get enlightened. He goes to this yogi. It's a Vedic story. He goes to the yogi and he says, hey man, I want to get enlightened. What's all this about? Tell me. And the guy just he's in this sitting, his eyes are closed in this meditation. He gets up and he sees this guy is sincerely asking it. Then he closes his eyes for a moment, and it's as if his inner realm, the logo, speaks to him, even though it's a Vedic story. But the logo is technically is nameless, so it's all good. The yogi looks at him and says, this is the way, this is what I can say to you. There is 400 cows in this stable, you know, and this is the way I'm going to tell you the truth. You got to take these cows to the mountains in the fields, and when they're 1,000, come back. And this guy's like, yo, is this guy using me as like, you know, is this guy making me a cow too? What's going on? And then he's like, why would this guy trust me with 400 of his cows? Then he just puts aside the whole, you know, doubt simulations, and he just looks at the moment and he's like, sure, yeah, why not? Whatever. And the guy takes the cows, and because he really wants to know, and there's no other option, there's no Google there, you know. So I'm telling you that what the guy does is he trusts the moment and he goes forth. He trusts the unknown instruction, he goes forth. And he goes forth, and what happens is he finds himself sitting on a rock with all the cows grazing somewhere in this mountains in a safe field in nature. And he gets bored. And every day he's counting them exactly one by one to see, all right, the numbers are increasing. Eventually he gets tired. 1,000 is too much. And he just sits on the rock and he watches, or I wouldn't say a rock. It really actually it hurts sitting on a rock. You gotta sit on, like, let's say he's sitting on a log or grass or something. The guy's sitting somewhere. The guy sits sitting somewhere, and he's sitting there for so long that he starts noticing the sound of the birds. He starts noticing the colors of the leaves, how bright green they are. He starts noticing the different shading, the different shadows of the trees and the way everything is, and he's just getting fascinated. Wow, wow, wow. Is this the world I've been living in this whole time? And everywhere he looks, he's suddenly noticing that nature is standing its ground, it's marching into the unknown. And so the guy is there, and even he's so there so long that his inner realms, there's no longer any ripples, no longer any story, legend, myth, or subconscious archetype. He has become silence incarnate. He has become nature. He has returned. And he's there for so long that he stopped counting the cows and he's just in samadhi. He's as if he's living as the world for a moment, not just as a self in the world. And suddenly, of course, we got to know this, in India, cows are divine symbols. We should not forget this. We make, it's any animal. A cow is an animal. Never thought I'd be talking, supporting cows, but I guess somebody has. Cows are such unique animals that they cry. If their owner passes away, they just cry. They're like conscious. They're like they notice something is left. So one day, one of these cows comes up to the guy, one of the cows, and the cow is speaking. The cow's like, "Hey man, we're 1,000. Let's go back." And the guy's like, "Oh yeah." He suddenly comes back. He's as if he's stepping out of the Pure Lands and he's coming back to the realm. He realizes why he was there. He gets up. And he's like, "Yeah, I was here until these cows were 1,000. And so he's going and the cows are all following him. And suddenly he forgets where the way was. Like he had even forgotten counting and everything. Like he returned back from the void in some sense. The void of his Pure Lands, He doesn't know the way back. Suddenly the wind and the birds, they come to him and they speak. Notice in the story, the language of nature has opened up to him. The winds and the birds tell him where to go. The trees are like welcoming him towards his further resolution. The world is alive because he has realized how he is alive. That's the language of nature, where you're first standing in the same world as it. Then you can be a self to speak to nature. And that world is awareness, pure awareness. The man returns, kind of like how Gandalf in Lord of the Rings 2 returns with those infantrymen behind him, like running down to like save Theoden, and like they all left Gimli behind with the horn. But anyways, and so there's this scene where just like how Gandalf returns, the guy's returning with the cows behind him. The guru's like, "No way, no way. The cows are all following him. This is next level." You know. And so what happens, the cows are so liberated that they all go to the stable. The stable doors are open and they all go into the stable. And this guy who is blissed out, he's got the Satchidananda glimpse. He goes up to the guru, and the guru looks at him, and he says to the guru, I remember now. What is this enlightenment you were talking about? And the guru looks at him and says, you know it. And it's as simple as that, how the universal sector speaks. When you notice it, when you honor something, it lives. Honor means you care about the person's inner realms and how their inner realms is standing. What that means is, back in the day when two great warriors fought, it's as if when one of the warriors, their sword fell from the hand of the warrior, the other warrior would wait, because they were fighting not to kill each other. It was a demonstration of the greatness of skill. And it was the same in the school of Athens for philosophers, where there was no cinema, no radio, no entertainment. People would just go in the school of Athens, and they had, I don't know, like Diogenes and Plato would battle about. You know what I mean? Like, and it wasn't that they weren't physically fighting; they were speaking about the positioning of the cosmos in the eyes of man, which is the whole story of knowledge. So that's the thing. That means the more we trust life, the more the mind can move the body. Same way, it's like, isn't it fascinating that the person can get a plate from their cupboard, and as they hold that plate, it was an instant. They didn't have to sit for years and plan for that ability. They didn't have to sit years and train and meditate just to be able to pick that plate in an instant. Because they knew they could do it, it was accessible. Right? So it becomes something similar too, that when you find certain non-dual moments when you're alone with the cosmos in a way where language isn't between you, then it's the awe and reverence of the direct experiencer. Then free will is not language based. Free will is unknown experience updating based. So anyways, guys, thanks for listening. And voice of the formless. Voice of the formless. I'm going to read one poem for you. Poetry is the finger that got closest to touching the formless. Poetry is like the astronaut of the linguistic realms going into the unknown space, you know? Okay, so this poetic work is called, what did I call it? Glowing Madness. I wrote this in 2016, 15 and 16. All right, formless. Love form beyond. Love from beyond. Okay, no, that's not it. Beyond the thought. There we go. Beyond the thought. It's a short poem. What made truth? So I wrote this 2015. Beyond the thought. What made truth want to whisper into the hidden ear of the unhidden? Some men have mastered the art of bowing while standing up. Think collectively and you shall move beyond thought. Think collectively and you shall move beyond thought. That's the algorithm, folks. That's how the universe speaks. The universe speaks as the event that's happening in the It's like the person looks in the mirror, he's like, oh my god, am I reading the universe's poetry right now? So anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. I hope this episode was helpful. I'm gonna open up actually 10-minute Q&A And I'm going to share the Discord link first of all, if anybody wants to go on Discord. But I'm gonna put 5 minutes, guys, to be honest, because everybody is so knowledgeable that usually there's no question. It's as if I'm speaking to gods. There's no questions. Yeah. So yeah, guys, 5 minute Q&A. Questions welcomed. Feel free to um, feel free to ask anything, because this life happens once. So thanks for listening, guys. The vocal point of the talk is ended. If there's any questions, people can ask in the chat section, and I'll see you in Discord afterwards. Cheers. Okay, guys. So you think wants me? Okay, yeah, sure. It's a short poem. Actually, I navigated to a different page. Let me muster up the strength of lifetimes to open this other email to Sangha. Beyond the thought. Okay, here's the poem. So, guys, I'm reading the poem again. Beyond the thought. What made truth want to whisper into the hidden ear of the unhidden? What made truth want to whisper into the hidden ear of the unhidden? Some men have mastered the art of bowing while standing up. Think collectively, and you shall move beyond thought. Care for more than yourself in this life, and eternity was there before you were. For once there is inner peace, the outer realm is no longer in pieces. Because there's two types of freedom. There's a freedom that was there from the beginning, and you had shackled yourself, and there's a freedom that, no, the freedom was taken away, and has to be gotten a certain way. So I am telling you, we are now in a point where we have to start thinking like how cells in a body join to become a bigger thing, like a bigger intelligence, a more complex organism. So we have to implement the same strategy, but as conscious individuals in a civilization, yet at the same time have freedom for various dimensions. The advantage is that there is so many types of human beings, which means there's so many ways we can look at the world. Which means if there was, like, let's say in the future, everybody's head was connected to a computer, everybody's knowledge would be accessible to everybody. Do you know how it would be? Very interesting. It would be with the moment we connect all our heads to the same, program, it will be a situation where it's the extinction of the individual, but not physical extinction. It's as if we have become God in the body of man, which is really the folly of cyberspace, that it blocks itself out from the world that it was naturally in. Yeah. Guys, I'm going to read one more poem, I think. Let me see, are there questions? Oh, okay, there's more questions. So, okay, I'm going to read this poem. I just feel maybe I should share it. It's from another poetry work called Immortal Tears. And the poem is called Shadow of the Dust. And I think I was imagining like an actual dust particle, like the shadow of a dust particle. Honored by ambivalence, what has captured thought in your eyes? The moon got a sunburn and shouted at the sun, "Why burn your loved ones?" The sun responded through the darkest corners of the universe. Burn? Wow. So I'll read the poem again, guys. So, honored by ambivalence, what has captured thought in your eyes? The moon got a sunburn and shouted at the sun, "Why burn your loved ones?" The sun responded through the darkest corners of the universe. Burn? So, Dan says, what has become of your relationship to suffering? Been there, done that. That's my answer to you, Dan, in the chat section. Really, the thing is, I notice suffering, it's like there's a design level where there's no emotion, characterhood, or story, so you can't suffer. It's just a phenomena happening. It's like an event taking place. And then there is parts of it where the person can control. So for me, my relationship to suffering is that if I notice the suffering, I don't know. For me, there's a sense of it's not, I don't think about suffering, not in a physical sense. I mean, in a physical sense, it's a different story, but I'm thinking of like a suffering of the psychology of the person. It's like when you take the steering wheel of the car, you don't suffer. You know where you're going. There's that kind of feeling. So I feel that I wake up in the day as a creature, and there's a certain level of effort I exert, and then I return back to the void, and then the next day happens. You know? So I would say suffering is no longer a story for me. So, great question, Dan. What has become of your relationship to suffering? It's no longer a story. If it's a reality, it's an experience. If it is not of experiential value, it's passing by. Suffering is just an interpretation of a certain movement of the mind in a certain way. Daniel says, I think I'd expand the love of simplicity as much as complexity. Yeah, they're like two sides of a coin. If the coin's in your hand, you got both. You think says mind over matter, repairing the damages, rejuvenate. Okay. All right, guys. Seems like there's no more questions. So thanks for listening. And I'll see you in the Discord server. Blessings.